our subconscious drives 90% of our behavior. And so we're constantly perceiving each other, looking for danger, looking for safety, looking for we can drop our guard with this person or in this situation. I really want to encourage you to get to a point where you genuinely believe that even if he has ignorance to the topic, that he wants you to be well.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of She's in Sync. Today, I have a special guest on, Andrea Clark. And Andrea is a retired marriage and family therapist turned women's coach with over 25 years of experience guiding high achieving women to stop over functioning and live in alignment with their feminine design. She's the founder of The Soft Rebellion, a global movement redefining power, partnership, and personal leadership for the woman who's done holding it all, wanting to be met with love and devotion. She's also the host of the Truth About Mental Health podcast. And I was on there recently. It's such a great podcast. Definitely check that out. And I'm so excited to have a podcast swap with her. So she is going to be on today, and we're focusing mostly on how to talk to your partner about stopping birth control, because a lot of the weight of, and this is mostly geared towards women and, partners who don't necessarily want to get pregnant right now or perhaps ever. So this can be a tender topic. And especially if you've kind of made the decision, maybe you're like me or a lot of the women I work with, where your eyes have been open to like the dark side of birth control and how it's been negatively impacting you. You've probably made your decision that for your health and your well-being, you want to stop. But then of course there's well, I don't want to get pregnant. And it can bring up some tender feelings of like from your partner, as well as how do I have this conversation, because that is a partnership. So Andrea is gonna, come on as an expert in her field as a therapist turns women's coach and blend her worlds and talk about that. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, I'm super pumped to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So tell us a little bit about you. Like we were just talking before we hopped on, like your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, so it's been really wild and fun. I started out as a therapist. I thought I was going to change the world by becoming a marriage and family therapist. And then I learned there's like a whole system attached to everything we do. And I was just very naive. And I did a lot of really great work though, but it just had its limitations. And there were so many things I wanted my clients to know and I wanted to be able to do to support them, and I couldn't because of red tape. And so eventually I decided to walk away. I kept my license for a couple more years, and I was actually coaching while I was a therapist, but I walked away completely to just really step into the coaching space and the online space and have more freedom to speak freely and coach even more intuitively and bring in many different elements that are required for a woman to actually thrive and be successful, reach her goals while also not completely taxing her body and her mental health and just her feminine design. So that's, combined, I have about 25 plus years experience, and I've walked through much of what I've supported women through. So I have a very embodied approach as well, which I think is really important. And I'm just really passionate about women and really empowering them to thrive. I'm also really passionate about people understanding and getting access to information. And that's a big part of what my podcast is about. It's like very much a passion project. And so that's why I do the podcast.
Yeah.
A little bit about my journey.
Yeah, I love it. And I love how you are like you work with my client too. Like the woman who's listening to this podcast is like the high achiever, type A. I call it like that's me too, like recovering perfectionist. Yeah,
So
very, very driven. And a lot of times we're the ones that, we're like, we don't feel stressed, but then we are the ones who are the most stressed and we need to really work on that. And so we're going to try and like take the stress of talking to your partner and break it down today. So the first thing I want to dive into is just when you have like I guess just like starting that conversation, because I've had women, and I will like transparently share, when I brought this up to my now fiance, it did not go well.
okay.
Because it was very much, and I know now it was coming from like a fear response of like we were not ready to get pregnant and we are still undecided about kids. And so it was very much like he only knew like birth control as the option to not get
Yeah.
pregnant. So at the time, though, I was like pissed. Like, I was like, this is not making me feel good. This is, again, my eyes were open to all the negative side effects of birth control that I wasn't told. And so I had made up my mind, and it wasn't really more of a conversation. It was more of like, hey, like, I want to do this. I think part of how I approached it maybe was part of why he reacted that way. And then it was just this like, we're kind of like going at it. And like, I started crying. He got upset. We both shut down.
Yeah.
So obviously, that's like not the way to do it. But how would you go about just like when you've made this decision, starting that conversation?
Yeah, so I think it's not a one size fits all. And what I mean by that is that the first thing is understanding that, every couple has their own unique relationship. He comes in with a set of beliefs, you come in with a set of beliefs. He has a communication style, you have a communication style, right? Like but what I hear, so I'm going to give you some blanket things to consider, um, knowing that I don't know each individual's
Yep.
situation. So you are 100% correct about how we start things up. Like just you, let's okay, if we've got high achieving, baddie type A women on here, like you already make a decision that's what's going to happen. And so in your mind it's kind of like I'm just going to inform this person that this is what I'm doing for the most part, right? But that's not how um you don't want to approach that when you're married or in a partnership or you're going to be married or you're spending your life together, because that person, even though they're not the one taking the medication, they still, it's like, hey, if we get pregnant, like this is a joint situation.
Yeah.
And so from their perspective, they're not even thinking about or aware of all the things like you've already gone through,
Yes.
all of the things you've had, the whole processing journey, right? I do this to my husband a lot, and I've really stopped doing it. It's like I've already spent a month researching something, or I've already spent 2 weeks mulling it over, researching it, getting all my data, getting all my XYZs, like, discerning through my feelings, and then I lay it on him like it's already processed, and like he should just be like, okay, sure, whatever. And that's something that I've really had to learn to take a step back on, and that I've helped other women who are like we are, where it's like we just are moving along, we're making decisions, we're figuring it out. That you want to just take a step back and think about the position your partner's in, not from a fear, like a place of fear, like he's not going to support me, he's not going to understand, but more, okay, if I were him and I was experiencing my partner just coming to me and saying, blah 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 blah, I've done all this research and this is what I'm going to do, he hasn't even had time to catch up.
Yeah.
And so that's like you just taking that perspective alone will mitigate a lot of his resistance in the like actual exchange that the two of you have. So that's the first thing I want to say.
Yeah.
The second thing I want to say is, and I know that women like we are used to moving fast, but if you have a partner who you know their pattern and it's like they need time to process information, maybe they're not like the same type of decision maker as you are. I'm going to encourage you to actually be strategic, not manipulative, but strategic. So there are times when I know that it's a better approach to, over the course of let's say a month or a couple weeks, drop a few hints. And again, it's not this, it's just to like prime them, to kind of open them up, especially if you know how your partner makes decisions and processes information. Okay. So you can just drop a few hints where you're like, oh my gosh, I was reading this article and da 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 da, and that really freaks me out. And I didn't even know that. And you're giving a little bit of that factual information, and you're informing him of your experience, like your feelings and how this information is making you feel. And then you just kind of leave it there, right? And you do that a couple of times where, and this might not be necessary for everybody, but again, it's not a one size fits all. We all have different patterns and things and, fears and communication styles. So you will know when you're listening if this is like going to be a helpful thing for you to do with your partner. Okay. And the other thing to consider is that even though this is your body and you're putting the medication in your body and your body's having the response, he hasn't even been given that perspective yet. So if you go into it like this guns a-blazing, it doesn't allow him to kind of drop his guard and open up to that perspective.
Hmm.
Right? Like this is all new for him. And so as much as it's easy to really start like leaning into that feeling and it's totally valid, again, you want to take a step back, and you didn't even think this way until you got this knowledge maybe 3 months ago or 6 months ago. So you want to kind of go back and think, okay, how what was I thinking and feeling? What was he thinking and feeling before I even came across this knowledge? And you want to approach the conversation that way, because what that's going to do is so there's something that exists called neuroceptivity, and our nervous systems and our subconsciouses are constantly talking to each other. Like, have you ever walked into a room and um, you immediately get this feeling about somebody, like, I don't know if I might steer clear of that person, or
Yeah,
you
like your
walk
gut.
into a room, yeah, and you're like, man, this room, I'm loving it, the vibe here, the people, this feels good, like we are constantly reading each other and it's not a conscious thing. It's all below the surface, right? Our subconscious drives 90% of our behavior. And so we're constantly perceiving each other, looking for danger, looking for safety, looking for we can drop our guard with this person or in this situation. And so if you come into this conversation with your partner in a way where you're not already guarded, you're not already expecting it to be a battle, you're not like I really want to encourage you to get to a point where you genuinely believe that even if he has ignorance to the topic, that he wants you to be well, that at the end of all of it, you will figure out that the pathway that's going to help you be well, then that's going to allow you to approach him in a way where he isn't feeling a tension before it actually starts on the surface. Because what will happen is he will put his guard up unknowingly because your guard's already up unknowingly. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like a couple key things, like just to unpack even further. So, I'm hearing you
Yeah,
say, like, the last thing like, I always talk about it being like, from my previous history working with eating disorders, we called it social safety, like getting yourself into social safety before you have that conversation.
yeah,
Like, whatever that is for you, if it's like, dancing around, if it's like calling a friend, hugging your dog, like, deep breathing, whatever that is, get yourself in the right mindset and don't mind read or like future trip that it's going to be a bad conversation because
yeah.
that's automatically going to make it's like that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, because you'll be bracing internally even if you don't think you are. And then you walk into the room or you say, "Hey, can we talk?" And he already feels that
Yeah.
before you even that it's real, like it's neuroscience.
Yeah, when you're nervous or you're anxious, like versus when you're relaxed and calm and happy, like we can sense that on each other.
And it's definitely okay to have apprehension because it's a big conversation, and it's probably something you're feeling apprehensive about just in general because again, you don't want to get pregnant or you're not ready or whatever. And so the other thing that I teach women in my coaching speeches is that men actually, like masculine energy, men, they actually make more decisions in relationships based on their counterparts' feelings, not based on logic. And logic is actually a very masculine trait. It doesn't mean that women can't have logic or we're illogical, but we actually, in our feminine design, are more illogical. We're more emotional, we're more cyclical, right? That's why we have the hormone rhythms that we have. That's actually more honoring of our design. We have the ability to be logical, but when we function from a logical space all the time, we're actually bypassing our feminine design. And I a lot of times because of the world we live in with all of these criteria and being made to feel like, oh, you're too emotional or you're too this or you're too that and you need to be logical and and it really being kind of a male dominated world, we think that we're going to appeal to our partner by first speaking to the facts and the logic of the situation. And I don't know about you if you've ever experienced this, but I don't know if you've ever started that way and it actually didn't help until you actually started talking about how you feel,
Mm.
and then your partner softened and was more open and attuning to you more when you actually talked about how things are making you feel. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I know that my husband, if I talk about how I feel, he leans in and he attunes to me and he's constantly attuning. Now, facts come in, but I don't try to lead with like having this very logical debate or argument about something.
That's a really interesting point because when you were talking earlier about like knowing your partner, their communication style, I was thinking back to when I had this conversation with Jared and my fiance, and he's a very it's very interesting to me. He's a very logical, like he's an engineer, like very like factual, like show me the research, planning ahead. And so, I was thinking about what you were saying earlier of like one thing I wish I would have done is come more prepared with like the why, but
Yeah.
like not to just like overwhelm with like research papers or anything because like he's also not a reader, so he's not going to like read these things.
Right.
But I like that you're kind of doing like a sandwich of like let's lead with the emotion because if your partner cares about you, they're going to lean into that and they're going to be more receptive to that, and then also coming prepared with some like, but here's
Yes.
like other options for fertility, like for
Yes.
pregnancy prevention. Here's like research or, some facts that I learned throughout my journey. And these are the little tidbits you can drop along the way, like you were saying, versus just blindsiding them being like, hey, like I learned this list of things that it's doing to me. I'm going to stop, like, coming in hot, dropping those little tidbits along the way
Yeah.
coming in with how it's affecting you emotionally, physically appealing to their emotions, but then also sandwiching in some like logic later in the conversation.
Well, essentially, masculine energy is a very provider protective energy. So if you approach the conversation, and trust me, I didn't do this for a lot of my life because I'm a high achiever. I'm like, let's just get it handled. I've overridden my feminine a lot of my life and been very like logical problem solver. And we can totally access those parts of us, but that's not actually we're not supposed to live there, right? And so when we approach our partners, and if they're like a healthy masculine man, and we first approach them with this, like, these are my feelings, this has been my experience, what that's going to do is it's going to invite or kind of activate, right, their provider, protector, problem solver mode, because they don't actually want us to be unhappy or in distress. They actually want to give us everything they can to make us happy. That's what makes polarity. That's what makes masculine feminine rhythms work. And so if you open up the conversation that way, and then yes, you need the facts. Like it's not just like this makes me feel this way and that's it, right? But
Yeah.
it's like you don't lead with the facts. You lead with this, can you help me solve this problem? Like I'm in distress, like I'm worried, my body feels out of whack, I'm feeling upset, I'm freaked out or whatever it is, right? Like I'm really distressed over this. And of course, it's like, of course, like I don't want you to be distressed. I love you. Like, yes, let's figure this
Mhm.
out. And then you share about, well, I've been learning about this and I've done this research and I have a lot of research. I don't want to overwhelm you depending on who he is, but like there's so much and I'm happy to share it with you, but I really think that X, Y, and Z, you know how I've been struggling with this stuff, like this health issue or this or that. I really actually think it's the birth control and here's why. And, and you first talk about that, right? It's like you lead with these feelings, you lead with your distress, you lead with why this is important to you from like your like an emotional perspective so that he opens up to like, I want to help her solve her problem. I want to take care of her. Then you bring in some factual things, your journey of discovering this, like why it's concerning to you. And then you can say something like, I know that this is not ideal because we're not ready to get pregnant or we don't want to. And I'm aware of that. And I'm wondering, how do you think we can solve this? Like I know that there's lots of alternatives. You don't want to just start bombarding him with like, how do you think we can solve this? Like,
Do you feel like are men like natural problem solvers? Like I at least feel like that. Like that's always Jared's reaction is he's like when I say something, he's like, well, he goes to problem solving because exactly what you said. It's like he doesn't want me to feel like that. And sometimes when I just need him to listen and hear me out, like I have to tell him. But we've communicated about that, and that's really been really helpful when I'm like, hey, I don't need to problem solve, like I just need you to listen. But does that kind of tie into what you're saying here? Like,
Right. Well, this is leveraging their natural problem solving abilities and their urge to solve your problems
right.
in a good way. Like it's harnessing it, it's inviting it in a positive way.
Collaborative too. Like it's
And he's going to help take ownership of this problem. He doesn't want you to feel unwell. He doesn't want the birth control to make you sick. He doesn't want you to be sad and like anxious and depressed that you're, or whatever it is that's happening,
yeah.
right? And, or, be having these weight issues or these acne, whatever it is. And, so but it's inviting him. It's not telling him. It's inviting him like, I've done a lots of research. I feel very confident that there's other things we can do to prevent, but I'm just wondering, like, what do you think? How do you think we can solve this problem so I don't have to feel so unwell anymore?
Hmm.
Right? And then he has to actually realize, like, okay, this is a problem, like, and I have ownership in this problem, right? She's clearly like not doing well because of whatever we're doing at this point. She doesn't want to be unwell anymore. I'm going to help her figure this out. I want to help fix this problem. So then that the conversation can go many different ways, but when you ask a question, it like invites ownership and it's harnessing some of his strengths that he already has anyway. Right. And so, then it could go many ways. He might have a lot of questions. He might at first be like, I'm way too freaked out, and that's fine. But it's like, again, you know your partner best. And so come prepared with information. If he's like, well, what did you find? Like, yeah, I want to find a solution too. I don't want you to be unwell, but what did you find? Because I'm freaked out. Like, I don't want us to get pregnant. And you can say, neither do I. So here's what I found, right? And then you kind of just present it to him. And it might be that you ask him to look it over and you guys revisit the conversation in a couple days so that he can look it over. He can do his own. Some men are that way. They want to have some space to process and look at the information. My husband is very much like I can make a comment to him and I know when to not say anything else. And he will circle back to me like a week later and go, I've been thinking about what you said, and I looked into X, Y, and Z, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And it's part of it is that, like, when we are ready and we want to go, like, we've already made the decision because we've already been processing it, but we have to understand that there's going to be a window where there needs to be a certain amount of patience to lovingly invite him into the process and really activate his protector provider energy because that will make him want to find solutions, right? And so that might mean that you have to go through a process of 2 weeks of him sorting through information and asking questions. You know what I mean? Like I don't know each person, but and that's part of what I think sometimes women set themselves up for frustration is they're ready to make a decision, but they've already processed everything.
Yeah, like months ahead of time. And they're like, okay, this
Yeah,
is like the cherry on top of the sundae, like telling him. Yeah.
yeah, and then it's like they're frustrated that their partner is not immediate, and it's like, well, but you had a 3 month runway to figure this
Yeah.
out, or 6 months, or whatever. So it's stepping back and just taking perspective as the woman in this situation. Like, yes, this is happening to your body, 100%, not denying that, but also you've been on this journey and he hasn't been with you on it. So either you drop hints and kind of prime and bring him along a little bit, and then you have the conversation, or have some reasonable expectation for he needs time to process too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's totally reasonable, even though, yes, it is my body,
Mhm.
right? Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. And I think that one thing I'll say too, to tag off of some points you made is think about like for women listening, like when you learned all these things, like it was probably really overwhelming. Like I know I was so overwhelmed when I learned that I wasn't having a period on birth control, which was the reason I was on it, at 18 years old, that it was causing all these things to happen negatively in my body. Like I just was so blown away by that. And I was doing that. I was like researching for like, a good couple of months and think about that in relation to your partner of how they didn't have that time, but you did, And so think about how overwhelmed you were when you learned this. Because if we don't even know about our own body, and all the things that birth control does. Like, how are we can't expect our partners to know even an inch more than us, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think just be open to, there might be some resistance there, but I always tell people resistance doesn't mean a no. Like it it doesn't mean no. And especially if your partner knows you well and they probably know that you're coming to them with your mind already made up. It's not like you have to force that and say that. Like if they know you well enough, they already know that,
Yeah.
right? And so it's more giving breathing room to the process of them feeling like they're also coming to this decision with you versus they're just being told and then they're freaked out and then they don't know what works. It's really about that, like you having that expectation. It's not that you should feel like, yeah, if he resists, and that means I don't get to get off birth control. It's more like, no, he's going to honor me, but we might have to walk through this process together because he doesn't even see this coming.
Yeah.
And he needs the time and space to have his questions answered, express his fears, all the things that I've already done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I definitely did not come at it from that angle. It was very much it's my body, like it's my choice, like which yes, and unfortunately, because it is a joint situation of whether you have kids or not, and that decision of when do we have sex or what, those types of things, it has to be more collaborative. So that's as a whole, like just a big takeaway is making this process more collaborative sooner and, giving them space versus you taking it all on of like, because it's my body, like I'm going to learn all the information, which, like, yes, of course. And because there is that duality of, your partner being involved in this too, bringing them on board as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really how I looked at this when you asked me to talk about this is it's not about it not being your body or your decision. It's more how can you communicate it in a way that's going to be the most effective and successful for you two to come together to move to forward on it,
Yeah.
right? That's what it's really about. Like it's
Hmm.
not about denying what you're going to do. It's more about how can you invite him on board versus this like, listen, get on board. So type of
Yeah.
situation, right?
Yeah. And also like managing your own emotions. 'Cause I like what you said about just because there's resistance doesn't mean it's a no. Because I know, and that's probably just how our brain works, right? Of like, we're like, okay, like I made up my mind, but if he resists, then this is going to ruin my whole plan. Like, and so really coming at it of like, he probably needs time to process, sift the information, ask questions, whatever. But then also, it makes sense that he's going to have some resistance, most likely, unless he's just like, okay, sure. Like, I doubt that. And especially if you're listening to this conversation, I doubt your partner's like that. But it is coming from like a emotional place of like wanting
Mhm.
to know, they want to know all the information too. And so when they maybe have that, not jumping to like, oh my gosh, like this is like, we're going to have to break up or I'm going to have to stay on birth control because it's just, they need some time and some space to process it.
Well, I think it's going back to this idea that I mean, did you have resistance? Was there a moment of resistance for you, Taylor? Maybe not like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get off birth control, but more like, okay, I want to get off birth control, but what the heck? Now
Yeah,
what am
this
I
is
do?
scary.
Right. So you had resistance. Of course, he's going to have resistance. So it's just, again, it's like you've already arrived at the decision. And it's like you can't forget the process you went through to get to your decision because he's now going to have to go through that
Yeah.
process. And if you really look at it from that perspective and you're not taking it personal, like he doesn't care or he
Yeah,
doesn't,
exactly.
more like he's going through the process out loud to you. You didn't go through the process out loud to him, but he's going through it out loud to you. It's not that he doesn't care. That's why I said approach it with assume that he cares, assume that he wants you to be well, assume because there are going to be questions and things, and you're going to be like, well, I don't understand why you don't get this, but it's like, well, you took 6 months to get
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
so I think that if most of the women on here, obviously, I can't ever say what the outcome's going to be because but if you can approach it with some of these things in mind, I promise you the conversation will go so much better. The decision making process will go so much better than if you go in it feeling like you have to defend or advocate or protect the decision you want to make.
Yeah. Or convince. Maybe that's another one. Like convince them to, be at the same place you are with that decision too.
And it's really reasonable that they're going to need time to get on board. Like,
Yep.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like we both said, you've been researching and learning all this stuff for probably the first time for X number of months. So they're going to need time to do the same thing. And you need to be patient with that versus taking it as like, oh, well, this is a no, or they don't care about me.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say is that don't just hand them everything. Like, obviously, hand them some places where they can start. But if you want them to really take ownership into this problem solving, it's you want to kind of lean back and give them space. Even if you know all the answers, it's kind of like, well,
Yeah.
what do you think we can do? Like, there's a couple of different methods. Like, here I have a little bit of information if you want to look into it, but like, what do you think we can do? And lean back and be patient because you want him to take ownership over this, right? The whole point is it's frustrating that we're the only ones responsible for this decision and not getting pregnant. But part of how you mitigate that is you actually lean back a little and you hand it off. You invite him in and you kind of not play dumb, but you kind of play like, well, what do you think?
Yeah.
You need to make space for what he thinks. You need to make space for him to want to make a decision about this. If you've already decided, then he doesn't need to make a decision.
Yeah.
And he doesn't need to take ownership over understanding the information. So it's very much like a dance. It's a dance, and you have to make the space, like literally lean back and give him the space to step in to that open space for the decision and the research and the understanding.
Yep. Yeah. It's like killing two birds with one stone with that because it's like the collaboration piece and inviting him in to be a part of the solution, but then it's also going to help him learn more along the way when he's doing that research or he's learning more.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love all that. Is there anything else that you would say if you're thinking about having this conversation that you would, I guess, any other pieces of advice or thoughts?
I think that it really comes down to you. The prep work isn't just in the information, it's really in how you're going to have the conversation, right? Which is some of the things that we talked about. And I think a lot of people don't understand when it comes to anything, any kind of communication. It's less about the what and it's more about the how. It's always the how. It's because the how is what makes us have an emotional reaction. It's not the what. It's not like that you want to get off birth control, actually. It's actually that it's how you approach the conversation with your energy and if you're guarded or your assumptions, like I'm gonna have to convince him, this is gonna be a hard conversation. Just so how you do it is actually the most important piece, not that you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. And if you can keep that in mind, then how you start up the conversation and you keeping perspective, all of that will stay in place, even if it's uncomfortable. And that again will just set the tone for him, even if he's freaked out, to be more responsive to you in a positive way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that advice. And I'm still going back to what you said earlier about just bringing them along the journey with you, even if you're overwhelmed. Like I know I held a lot of that in because I was so overwhelmed with what I was learning, but just dropping little tidbits along the way.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Awesome. Those are all such great tips. And if women want to work with you or, connect with you more, where's the best place to do that?
They can find me on Instagram. That's where I spend my time. It's andrea.clark.mft.
Perfect. And we'll put that in the show notes too. So to finish off, I always like to ask my guests how you are nourishing yourselves in this season, today, this week, and it can be any of all sorts. So how are you nourishing yourself lately?
I love that question. And I have been staying off social media quite a bit, which has been so good for me, just spending my time doing other things. I also have implemented something called CEO Fridays. I did one last week and it starts next week. Like every Friday, I am not working. Now, I understand that not everybody has their own business, but if you can do something like that, where even if you have kids, if you let your partner know like once a month or, twice a month, I need 4 hours, 5 hours where it's just like mama CEO time, right? And you go do something that nourishes you. And I'm also taking a flower arranging class.
Oh, fun.
I myself, just me on a date with me, having a love affair with myself. So those are some things that I'm doing that are just bringing me more like joy and pleasure and more like rest and less stress and things like that.
I want to do all of those things.
Yeah, it's so good. It's taken me a long, long time to get to this point in my life where feel like I can, right?
Mhm.
Because I've always been so push, 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 go, 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 achieve, achieve, achieve. And the crazy thing is you can actually achieve more when you honor your need for pleasure, joy, and rest as a
Yep.
woman. It's
Yep.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like when with taking rest days at the gym, then you come back like more energized, can
Yes.
crush your exercise routine
Yes.
better. But if you just are doing your exercise like 7 days a week, pushing hard, it's not going to get you results and you're going to feel
No,
shitty.
yeah, it ends up really actually taking a toll on your body.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
I like the CEO Fridays. That's a great
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, you
Even if
should.
you don't own your own business, like take a PTO day on a random weekday. Like I feel
Yes.
I was like that person when I was like working, my corporate job. I was like the person that like hoarded PTO and like never used it unless it was like a vacation or something. And when I was stopping that job to open my business, I had so much PTO. I had to like use it all. And I was like, I wish I would have just
Yeah.
used this, even if it was for, a random Friday off or random Wednesday or,
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like, why can't we? And I think, my husband's really good about that. He has a lot of, great perks with his job. And so sometimes he'll just take a random day and he's like, it's just like a mental health day or like just a chill day for me. Like, and I think that not everybody has that resource, but when you do, people don't think about it. And it's
yeah.
like, why wouldn't you? It's there. It's
Yep.
there. You earned it.
Yeah.
So,
100%. Yeah.
mhm.
So if you're
Yeah.
listening to this, take a CEO day, take a day off of work. If you need this in your season, I think this is a great reminder to those of us who feel like we need to have a specific reason to do that. But take it just for fun or take yourself on a day date or whatever.
Yeah. Awesome.
So thank you again for being on the show. And hopefully this episode was helpful for all of you listening. As always, stay nourished.